it's Drybear. The First Descendant got a big update with a brand new character, so today I want to talk all about Ines Raya, the newest Descendant to join the roster in the First Descendant. Now, if you've never played her or you haven't unlocked her yet, we'll go through her abilities first, just make sure we're not leaving anyone behind, and then we'll talk about her kit, what it's good for, how to implement it, as well as a full build for her as for single target and also for mobbing, though I really don't think she's kind of, other than just kind of cheesing the Defiler fight, she's not really the most comfortable or well-built bossing character in general. So she is an electric Descendant that by default is singular and tech, and she is easily one of the best mobbers in the game. Like, her mob potential is up there with the best, and the way I view Ines when it comes to doing mobbing content is I think that she's a nice medley between Viessa and Freyna. She has the runaway potential that Freyna does for spreading damage and doing AoEs, and she has the spam potential of Viessa, which makes her a very strong character for 400% operations, for the new Void Erosion control, anything with a lot of enemies that you're facing. And when I see mobbing, I mean it. She is crazy with her mobbing content. I was able to one-shot all of the 20 Void Erosion floors using just Ines straight up. So she has a chain lightning ability that will bounce between targets. She can detonate anything that has a debuff on the target, and then she also has a directional attack which she can use to deal damage in front of her. Then she can put down this giant electrical storm which does scale with range, and it does damage in an area as well. So she has chain lightning bouncing around, she has these storms she can put down on the ground as well, and the damage scales up with that, and then she's applying a debuff which she detonates between targets. And what's great about her compared to some of the other characters in the game is she just needs a target nearby. I think this is exactly how like Keelan's targeted attack and Haley's shoulder mounted attack, that's how they should have been designed and should work, is how Ines does it, which is basically if an enemy is within range, even if you're not looking at them or they're even near your cursor, you can activate the chain lightning and it'll bounce between them, which means that for anything difficult like the Void Erosion where the enemies do a lot of damage, you can just stand behind a wall and spam chain lightning over and over and then detonate anyone that has a conductor status on them. But that's the basic overview. Let's go through the details of her abilities. The first one is called Chain Lightning. When you modify it, it becomes Floating Lightning, but this is basically a chain lightning that bounces between targets, and it has a scalar based on distance. So the effect range will go up as well, but basically has a fixed amount of bounces between targets. It can bounce off of you as well. So if you activate this and there's no other target besides the one you have, it'll bounce between you and the target as well, which is awesome. So you'll be able to kind of shoot this chain lightning out and deal damage with it that way. And if it's only you and one target, it'll bounce between you and the target as well. So you always have value out of it, even if there's only one target to bounce between. And it has this crazy amount of damage that it does, and it scales really well on top of that. It is by default, like if we take this off, it is by default a singular ability, which means that it will do singular damage and has more bounces if it's singular. However, you can put one of the red mods on and make it tech if you'd like to. That tech modification allows us to do some really cool things with it. It reduces the number of bounces, but it does give us more cooldown charges of it and makes it tech, which is useful for our purposes that you'll see later on. Now, after the chain lightning, let's talk about her passive, because that's where things get interesting. So her passive is Plasma Oscillation, and this thing is probably one of the most broken passives that we've seen so far in this game since it's been released. So the default of it is that when you deal when you deal lightning damage of any ability to targets, it will apply Conductor, which is a status effect. So you probably all noticed already, but you'll see this little ball floating over their heads. That means that they have Conductor. It's that little debuff that you see on them right there. Anytime you deal damage with an ability, it will apply Conductor on them, and they will take continuous damage while they have Conductor on them. However, if Conductor expires or the enemy dies, it will deal a big pulsing damage on them as well, which gives us a major boost to our damage on top of everything else. So applying Conductor is a big part of your gameplay and will factor in a lot to your second ability as well. The next part of it is that you convert your max MP into crit rate. So the more MP that you have that you run in the character, the more crit rate you get. And she's actually probably the easiest character in the game right now to get over 100% crit rate on, which means that you can do a lot of scaling. Now, obviously, with the limitations on crit rate on like like bosses, for example, this loses some effectiveness, but in general for mobbing, having a maximum crit rate is very, very good, which gives us a lot of damage scaling off of that as well, which is really nice. The next thing is, if the target has Conductor on them, and you have a skill critical hit rate that hits them, you have a 5% chance to recover 5% of your maximum mana. So you get a bunch of mana back if you have a bunch of mobs that are conducted and you're critting them, which means you can get perfect crit rate and you can just spam your abilities and you have all this extra damage going down and you're restoring mana. You can see my mana down at the bottom. As I bounce around and use mana, it's recovering itself because I'm critting on targets that have that conductor status on them. So this is your basic gameplay, is just kind of cycling through and getting mana back from that process, which is awesome. It also has this weird mechanic called Dark Current. Dark Current is something that deals damage to nearby targets based on max MP, and it inflicts Conductor as well. And it also can apply Conductor, which means that like when an enemy dies with a Conductor, they do damage, which can cause Dark Current, and then Dark Current can deal damage, which causes Conductor, and that's how you can get like a whole room of enemies just like pulsing damage like this, is Dark Current and Conductor like feeding off of each other and dealing damage off of each other and doing a whole bunch of damage and stuff like that. So there's all these things going on between the two of them. It's kind of an amorphous thing, but just note that your passive will constantly be dealing damage based on your maximum MP. So not only does max MP give you crit rate, it gives you overall damage because of the Dark Current portion. So when you have that, the last part of your passive is going to be your special meter. So if you go down here to the bottom of the screen, you see we have this red meter. That is our special resource called Plasma. You need Plasma to use your 3 and your 4. If you have no Plasma, you can't use your 3 or 4. They require Plasma and to actually function. So if you don't have that, you won't be able to use them. And the only way you get Plasma is by applying Conductor to a target that doesn't currently have Conductor on them. So if you're against a bunch of targets, as you're applying Conductor, you're gaining Plasma. And this is one of the reasons why she struggles in single target, is because once you've applied Conductor to one target, like a Colossus, you won't be able to apply Conductor to the target again. And if you're running any amount of duration, you can see that like the Conductor duration is ridiculous. By default, it's 30 seconds. And usually with any duration mods, because you're trying to make the storm longer, the duration can go up to 45, 60 seconds, which means that you're getting a little bit of Plasma every minute or so, which makes it very hard for single target. Now we'll talk about how you can make her for bossing, but this one fact makes her whole kit basically fall apart when it comes to single target. So it makes her very much suited for mobbing. But again, you can, as true with most things in TFD, you can brute force your way into a single target scenario by just spamming her first ability with high skill power. Next up is her second ability, Lightning Conductor. And this one is an interesting ability. And all this does is that if there are no targets nearby that have Conductor on them, it will deal damage to them and apply Conductor. However, if there are targets nearby that do have Conductor on them, when you pulse it, it will cause it to explode and deal a bunch of damage. And there's a target limit for this ability. However, it doesn't consider any enemies that have Conductor on them for that. And you can actually just, like, if everything has Conductor on them, they will all pulse and do a bunch of damage. So you're basically spreading Conductor and detonating Conductor. And it'll just look for targets that don't have Conductor and prioritize giving them Conductor if they don't already have it. And if they do, it'll deal damage to them. So in general, you want to be doing this once you know a lot of Conductor has been spread, but it's perfectly fine to walk into a room and apply Conductor this way and deal damage. It's just more efficient if you already have Conductor on as many targets as possible. So you're basically just cycling these two abilities, sending out Chain Lightning, detonating with your Conductor, Chain Lightning, Conductor, Chain Lightning, Conductor. And this is her basic mobbing setup, is using those two abilities. Her ultimate is the final piece to her mobbing setup, which is going to be Snare Hunter. This is just a lightning storm. You just shoot it down. It functions just like Viesa's ultimate if you had the Glacial Cloud mod equipped, which I think is a way better implementation than the baseline Blizzard for Viesa, and that you just shoot a projectile. So you activate it and you shoot a projectile, and wherever that projectile deploys, it will create a lightning storm, which means that you can activate and you can jump and aim it at the ground, and now this giant lightning storm will hit. It has a central area with this pink line. Inside the central area will be more damage at a higher frequency, and there's an outside area as well. That outside area will have the ability, you can see actually right now, this is the problem with her. All targets that I'm facing have Conductor, and it makes it like very hard for me. Like I can't get I can't get any more of my plasma because everything has conductors. So this is kind of like the limitation. But you'll notice that there's an inside circle for it and there's an outside circle. This outside circle does less damage and less frequently, but it does do a little bit. So it is kind of useful. And of course, this does scale with range as well. So that is her core mobbing kit. Then she has this really fun ability, which is her third ability called Discharge. So this one is a perfect release. It is a time attack or perfect release ability. If you don't know what perfect release is in any RPG or any gameplay mechanic in general, it means that it is a channeled ability that if you were to release that ability at the right time, you get a benefit for it. So when you're doing the ability, you kneel down and do it, you'll notice that there's a flash and then it'll time out and shoot. This is like Perfect Rush in Monster Hunter or Perfect Swing or, like, you know, there's tons of mechanics that are like this. So you'll notice that if I hold this and then release, let it time out, she just goes forward and shoots. However, if I release it when the ability flashes, she does a little spin. And that little spin will give her a big increase in damage. So if I release at the right time, huge chunk. Now this does a bunch of damage. You could probably even do a singular build for her that focuses on this ability in general, but because this ability requires your plasma, and plasma can only be applied when you're putting conductor on targets that don't already have it, it makes it kind of awkward to spam this ability, and also means it's kind of inconsistent being able to generate plasma. Now, in the future, if we get ways to generate plasma more consistently, or we get a new red mod that allows her to generate plasma more consistently, you could certainly use that and make this a really cool build that does a boatload of damage and just wrecks targets. But because plasma is so inconsistent, it makes it harder to build around it. And if you take that, so if we were to put on her best mod right now, Time of the Hunting Hounds, this makes her first ability have a charge on it. So you'll notice that we have 3 charges now on our first ability, our Chain Lightning. It also turns the Chain Lightning into tech and makes it so it has less bounces, but it gives us a really good option for mobbing. However, it turns her charge, her perfect charge, into a dash. So you'll notice that if I go down, I now have a dash animation, and it has a little knockback at the end as well. It's still a perfect release. It still does good damage, but it actually nerfs the damage on it a little bit. And based on that, you can release and deal damage that way, which is pretty decent. But it does reduce the damage of it and give you a little dash element to it. Now, you can use this if you're going to be doing like a mobbing build. You can activate these and then use this for a chance to like get some extra distance and damage on it, and it does do respectable damage. But again, you're probably just going to be using your plasma for your storms anyway if you're doing a mobbing build. And if you're doing single target, her single target is rough unless you just do this build and just spam Chain Lightning on one target in general. Now, you can also get some nice distance out of it. It's something that does lock you in place, which means you can't, you know, you're locked in place while doing it. But it does allow you to have a little bit of a knockback, and you can also aim up and shoot it into the air as well. So you can actually do some distance that way. Again, you know, it's got some uses to it. You can actually, if you needed to, just get away. You could do this to get some distance and reposition, and then just go back to your normal rotation. Now, since it's Drybear video, we have a Drybear one sheet for you. This is going to be my recommendation for building Ines, and we'll talk about alternate mods and all of that. This is going to be focused primarily on doing Void Erosion or 400% operations or general mobbing for her overall. I will talk about a bossing build that you can use for the Defiler. If you build it for pure damage and you get lucky on the animations the Defiler goes through, you can kill the Defiler incredibly fast, though again, you're basically nuking the entirety of her kit and just spamming Chain Lightning over and over. So it is a little cheesy, but it is doesn't mean that it's not effective for that means. So the way we would build this is we're going to run Time of the Hunting Hounds here, which is going to give us the option to turn our first ability into a tech ability, which means that we can stack the passive from Secret Garden. So these are the build. This is the build that I would run with for Secret Garden, and the build that I would run with for Ines as well. And I would run Slayer set on top of that with an electric tech reactor that rolls skill cooldown and skill crit damage. Now, I know reactor farming is a huge challenging point, and it does definitely take a long time. So I would say the best role for a tech reactor for this build for her is going to be skill cooldown and skill crit damage, because we don't actually have a whole lot of cooldown in the build already, and she does benefit from it. Even her single ability with a short cooldown, some cooldown makes a big difference in this build, as she has plenty of other stats to scale off of. And since we have very, very high, near perfect crit rate on almost every enemy, crit damage is the other best option. So crit damage and skill cooldown would be the best roles, but I think you could also run skill crit damage, and you could also make skill duration up work. You could make a range build work. You could even do tech power boost ratio if you wanted to as well. I think those all are viable, and they would just change what mods you use for her in general and swap those out. So for example, say you got like range roll on your reactor, you can maybe just swap this for like cooldown, another cooldown ability or something with a little bit more oomph on it, just to make sure that you can manage it. Or maybe you can just move around some other options for cooldown to scale that up in place of that extra bit that you got. And you probably will get a pretty similar amount of damage from skill crit damage and like power boost ratio, like tech power boost ratio if you wanted to, or even just maybe swap one of these power boosts for a little bit more cooldown if you needed to. But there's a little bit of wiggle room in there, but I would say that the most valuable stat on your reactor by far is going to be the skill crit damage, because she crits so dang much and the modifier on her is so incredibly powerful. So I am currently not out in the field, so these are going to be lower than normal. So this is going to usually sit between 94 and 100%, and the skill crit damage scalar is going to be between like 5.1 and 5.4, depending on your build and setup. So you actually get a large, ridiculous amount of damage from just criticals in general. And then for the set, you basically want to run full Slayer. This is just because the skill power on it is so incredibly good, and it's basically impossible to pass up. Just getting raw skill power like you normally would with like some of these other like modules, just getting skill power in general is so incredibly powerful, and they haven't given us anything that replaces Slayer in that sense. Even with the increase to skill cost, because she gets so much mana back from her abilities, it just works out. It's a huge increase in power. Now, for the stats, and I do not have a good set of Slayer at all. The most important things that you want on these is going to be maximum mana and mana recovery. So for the processor or the auxiliary, I would do max HP, MP out of combat. For the sensor, you definitely want max MP. Remember, max MP makes Dark Current stronger and also gives us more crit rate, and also it helps us recover mana because it's based on percentage as well. MP recovery and combat. For the sensor, you want defense and MP recovery modifier, and then for the processor last, it doesn't really matter because they're not really building for shield or shield recovery, but there isn't really a lot of great choices for this last slot, so you can kind of flex whatever you want on here. I guess you could probably, even if you really wanted to, if you're mobbing, you can put equipment drop rate and item acquisition distance just to make your mobbing a little bit more mobby. Then we're gonna run, like I said, Time of the Hunting Hounds. We want as much cooldown as we can get. I found at least for the Void Erosion, because like, you know, floors 16 to 20, the mobs start hitting really hard. I ended up running increased HP and time distribution for max HP. You could even do even more max HP if you wanted, like anything with HP on it. Like you could do Battle Stamina if you wanted. You could do, I wouldn't do Stim Accelerant because you'd lose damage there, but you could do, or HP Amplification is probably the other safe bet. Once you've already got increased HP here, this is going to give you a big increase in HP. I kind of liked the cooldown reduction here just to get more spamming out, mainly because I was kind of using the line of sight more than anything and just not taking damage while doing Void Erosion. But if you wanted to, HP Amplification would give you more HP overall and is a good fit with increased HP just to make sure you don't die during the process. Now, when it comes to Void Erosion control, just because you can shoot through walls, it means that you can just kind of very easily clear this. Like I said, if you run this build exactly as is, you should be able to very easily clear all 20 floors of Void Erosion. And again, because you can shoot through walls, you don't even have to let enemies shoot at you or see you at all. So all you have to do is put down your Lightning Storm on the ground and then use any line of sight, any wall, anything that blocks their vision of you, and then just spam Chain Lightning and use your Detonate. Both the abilities target through walls. They see through walls, they will target through walls, they will bounce through walls, and all you have to do is just stand behind a wall and use it. And this is why I opted for time distribution for Void Erosion specifically, is you can just keep doing this over and over. And honestly, with the setup, you have so much ridiculous amounts of damage. Again, because we're running Time of the Hunting Hound, every time you use a tech ability, you have a chance to scale up the passive of Secret Garden, which gives you even more skill power. And she does so much ridiculous damage on her own that she doesn't really need anything else. So if you're looking to very easily clear Void Erosion and you want to do it safely, Ines is probably the best bet for it and probably the best usage of her right now. Though obviously, if you're you're clearing all these mobs so easily, you can very easily bring her into special operations or 400% dungeons or any dungeons or any mobbing content that works well for her. You can just use her as that option to burn through it. She's definitely a very easy cakewalk through the whole Void Erosion if you're trying to farm the cores for your weapon unlocks. Now, if you'd like to, you can bring this setup directly into Defiler or Single Target. Just keep in mind that basically, because you can't apply her passive, the Conductor, to a target over and over again, you won't really be able to gain access to her Snare Hunter, Electric Storm, or her Snare Acrobatics, or the charge from it, because they do require plasma, and you won't be generating basically any plasma in a single target situation. However, as is TFT tradition, you can just stack a ridiculous amount of skill power and just spam her Chain Lightning over and over and over and over, and because it does bounce between you and the other target over and over and over, you can actually get enough damage to burn down targets even like Defiler. Now, to be honest, this isn't really like unique to her in general. I feel like you could very easily get a 30 to 60 second Defiler with Ultimate Sharon. You could do it with Bunny, you could do it with Valby, you could do it with Glay. Any character that can do a significant amount of single target damage on one target can very easily clear Defiler. And again, I don't think this is like a representation of Inez's single target bossing potential, but it is an option if that's what you want to do. You can take this exact build and bring it in, or you could go even more Glass Cannon if you'd like and move in things like Dangerous Ambush, which is an easy damage amp for you, which is basically if a target is not targeting you, which is usually when a target is like when the boss is downed. This gives you a massive damage increase when the boss gets stunned or isn't targeting anything, and it's super easy for burning it down. So I would just take the exact same build, and you could even, you know, I tried removing this. This actually probably shouldn't be removed at all, to be honest. It's just so freaking good. But put this in here, and this would be the bossing setup that I would use if you wanted to like min-max it for it overall. I would keep the same mods, except I would slot in Dangerous Ambush for the extra damage, and then Perfect Anti-Venom to slow the incoming damage from Defiler in general. But again, it's not like you're going to be completely missing out from this. You'll lose a little bit of cooldown, you lose a little bit of offense, but you get major damage when they're down, and then you get immunity to poison, which is huge. And this same build can very easily, if you have a good reactor and you're set up with the right things, you can very easily burn down Defiler or any single target. But again, I don't think it's what she's meant for. I think any character really can probably burn down Defiler solo in a very easy sense, but she is very, very good at Void Erosion. She honestly kind of trivializes Void Erosion if you use line of sight properly, and she's also insanely good at dungeoning in general. And that is Ines. She is probably one of the strongest Descendants we've seen released in a while. She's honestly like the mobbing version of Haley when she came out. She is a great fit for the new content Void Erosion if you're looking to farm, and I think overall, I wish that Keelan was as strong or as impactful gameplay-wise as Ines is in general. And on top of everything else, I think she's just a blast to play. She's super fun. Like I said, I call her Freyessa, where she's just basically if Freyna and Viessa had a baby. I probably shouldn't phrase it that way for the TFD audience, but yeah, it's the combination of their two kits. High spamming abilities, good area control, as well as runaway mechanics for clearing mobs and things like that. She's awesome. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.